Jonah itself is a very simple story. It's about a man running away from God and about God pursuing him. And I hope, as I say that you'll be open to seeing how the Bible teaches us about what it means to run from God and how that can be sorted out in our own lives. So at the very beginning of the story, Jonah is called to make waves. Yes, puns will be very much a part of this series. So it begins this way. Now, the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, "Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come against me." So this is Jonah's calling. God said, get up, go to Nineveh, and call it out. These are his marching orders. And God isn't really pulling any punches here. There's no bait and switch like, oh, wow, I didn't know they were that bad, Jonah, once he finally got there and realized how bad they were. He knows from the very beginning they're evil. And there's no secret mission underneath like, oh, Jonah, why don't you go and secretly discover if there are any God-fearing people in Nineveh and, pull them out. And if by chance you get an opportunity to preach, then maybe you might want to take that opportunity. No, he's telling Jonah, a preacher, to go to the biggest, baddest, meanest, most powerful city in the whole world, go into the very center of it and tell everybody to repent and turn to God. Why? Because they're bad. Their evil has come up before me, God says. I noticed it, says God. They're really bad. This is a bad group of people. They're cruel. Let me give you an example. One of their kings, Ashurnasirpal II, say that 10 times fast, boasted in one of the accounts of one of his conquests. He says, "I stormed the mountain peaks and took them. In the midst of the mighty mountain, I slaughtered them. With their blood, I dyed the mountain red like wool. The heads of their warriors I cut off, and I formed them into a pillar over against their city. Their young men and their maidens I burned in the fire. I flayed their leader, and his skin I spread upon the wall of the city." I mean, there's nothing pleasant there. There's no redemption, it seems like to me, from my earthly perspective, of a person that is glorifying that kind of violence. Now, can we agree from the kind of the human, I want to save my own skin perspective, God asking you to go to a people that act and behave like that is an unreasonable, irrational thing to ask. Can we agree on that? Can you imagine, at the height of the Cold War, if God had asked you to go to Moscow, go right to the middle of Red Square, and preach to the Soviets that they must repent? Right? Can you imagine doing that? I mean, what would happen if you did that right out in the open? I don't mean like being called as a missionary to go to Russia and behind the scenes try and secret out some, Christians and maybe secret in some Bibles every here now and then and here and there. I'm talking about right out in the open, preach and tell them that they're wrong and that they need to repent. The best thing that you could hope for is that you would just get ridiculed. Like maybe they would throw some tomatoes at you, a couple of dead cats here and there, who knows? Right? They might laugh at you. That's the best that you could hope for. The worst, obviously, that could happen to you is that you would be tortured and killed. I mean, you heard what we just read from one of their kings. But here's the thing. Jonah knows God. He knows that God is a fortress, that he's a redeemer, that he's mighty in battle, that he's faithful and true. Jonah is a prophet of God. Supposedly, he's heard all of those things before, and God asks him to do this thing. And if you know God, if you've been raised on all of his miraculous stories of his faithfulness and might and redemption, then what's the problem? If you know that you're worshiping a God and you know that you have a calling like this, what's the problem? Well, I think it's a test. And so this is a test for Jonah, and it is also often a test for us. Do I actually trust what I have been taught about God? Or do I only trust what I have seen with my own eyes, what I've tasted with my own mouth, what I've touched with my own hands? We're pretty physical in terms of our orientation as human beings. So when push comes to shove, most people are going to go with what they have actually experienced in life. However, God calls you and me to go beyond our experience. And what do I mean? Well, maybe it might look something like what happened to Gideon in Judges chapter 7. And God came to Gideon and he said, your army is too big, Gideon. I mean, it looks like you're trying to win this war. And I'm sure Gideon's response was like, yeah, I am. And God says, okay, well, there's some boys here, and it looks like there's some pretty wimpy men that don't even really want to be here. They don't want to fight. Why don't you send them home? And Gideon's like, okay, well, that seems like a reasonable request. I mean, we only want the best warriors to be engaged in this battle. So why don't we invite anybody that doesn't want to be here to go home? And 2/3 of his army goes home. And then God says, you still have 10,000 men left. I mean, your army is still too big. Why don't we only take the men who drink from the brook in this really weird way? And Gideon is like, wait, what? I mean, God, that's really weird. Like, there's only going to be a few hundred men that are left after all of this. And God's like, yeah, that's an unbeatable number. What's the point in all of that? God was simply saying, Gideon, do you trust me? If you trust me, follow my lead. I don't have to explain myself to you. I don't have to give you words of comfort. Just know that I'm going to win this battle for you. So what does Gideon do? Well, he went because he took refuge in the character of God. He said, if God is my protector, if he is my refuge, if he is my strength, if he is my right hand, then if I know who my God is, I know what his promises are. I know his record. And so when God came to Gideon and he said, Gideon, I want you to jump, Gideon's like, how high? But when God came to Jonah, Jonah took refuge in his own wisdom, and Jonah took refuge in his own experience and his own feelings. You see, there really is only two options when God calls you out. You can either take Gideon's way, you can either take refuge in God's record and in his promises and say, I'm going to trust you in this, and I don't know how you're going to do it, but I'm just going to go and I'm not going to disobey you. Or you can say, find me a boat. I'm going away. So what happened to Jonah here could easily happen to any of us, I think. Here's this man who had served God. He'd been religious for years. But when the test came, the doctrine of God with which he'd been familiar for years, was of no help to him. Why? Because he'd never actually experienced the reality of God. He froze and he quit. Jonah refuses to take the plunge.